Sermon 33, Building the Tabernacle.
In studying the lessons in the Old Testament tonight, we're going to be studying about Israel's preparation so that they would be able to worship God as He would have them to worship Him. Moses had gone up and down the mountain many times to receive instruction from God as to what God wanted him to do and what he was to teach the children of Israel. With him to a certain point was Aaron and Nadab and Abihu and 70 of the chosen elders of Israel. But only Moses was allowed to come near the Lord on the mount. An interesting passage there in the Bible is a view that is given of the children of Israel as they are seeing the Lord, as it says, and it's like He is walking on precious stones in the vision there that is seen. And of course the people were commanded not to try to break through, and God on a number of occasions instructed Moses not to allow them to do so, and it was to be Moses that would go up to the top of the mountain to receive the instructions. And so Moses would get the instructions, and he would come down and he would tell the people what God wanted them to do, and the people would agree, and they would tell Moses, "We are in agreement, is what's said." And then of course God would call Moses back up the mountain so that he could receive further instructions. Tonight we are going to be dealing with the Ark of the Covenant and the building of the Tabernacle, which would be used in worship to God for many years. As a matter of fact, it would be actually used more years than I'm sure that God intended when He first gave instructions. Because of the disobedience of the children of Israel, they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, so that added 40 years to the use of the tabernacle itself. Many stories have been told about the Ark of the Covenant. As a matter of fact, there have been movies made about it. Harrison Ford made a movie, and the Lost Raiders Ark. I know we've probably seen those movies. The idea that the Ark of the Covenant is lost, and of course in the movie, the Ark of the Covenant that they display is a lot bigger than what the Bible describes it as being. Moses went up on top of the mountain to receive instructions from God, and these instructions would be instructions on preparing the children of Israel so that they could worship. And this time that he went up on the mountain, he was up there 40 days and 40 nights. And God instructed Moses that he was to receive offerings from the people of the things needed to build the ark and the tabernacle and all the tables and candlesticks and things that would be in the tabernacle, all of its furnishings, and also for all of the clothes that would be worn by the priest and the high priest. In the building of the ark, it was to be built out of the same wood that Noah had constructed his ark. And the Bible calls this shittim wood, which is, I'm told, a type of cedar or type of oak, according to many of those that have studied the different kinds of woods in that part of the country. But it was a wood that had endurance, that is, it would last for a long period of time. The ark itself was 45 inches long, 27 inches wide, and 27 inches high. And once this box, if you please, was built, it was overlaid in gold, inside and out, in pure gold. On each corner of the ark was a gold ring put. This would be used to hold the staves that would go through the ring so that the priest could carry the ark from one location to another. Around the top of the ark, there was a border that was called the crown, a design around the top of the ark, and it was made also of pure gold. And just like the staves that were overlaid in gold, the rings were overlaid in gold. And once the staves were put in the rings, The Bible says they were never to be taken out. I mean, once the ark was constructed and everything there was in its place and everything was overlaid with gold and the stays were put in, then they were not to be taken out. So you had this ark, this box that was made, and I'm, as you visualize in your mind, it had to be very beautiful, to have this particular work and to be covered in gold as it was. But on top of the ark would be placed the mercy seat. The mercy seat, the very top, or we would say the lid to the Ark of the Covenant, was made out of solid gold. And it was the size of the top of the ark, that it would fit just perfectly on the top of the ark. On each end of the top of the ark, there were 2 cherubims made. And each cherubim was reaching out its wings and touching the wings of the other cherubim. Some say that these are angels, the representation of what we think of as angels with wings. Of course, when you do the study of angels in the Bible, we find that there were angels that appeared in the form of man. They didn't have wings. Many of the Bible historians believe that when you read about the cherubims in the Bible, you read about what we picture as angels. And so this very beautiful scene here that you have the 2 cherubims on the ends of the ark, and they're spreading out their wings and they're touching each other. Later on in the Bible, we'll read about those who would flee in for mercy many times and go in and grab hold, and hang on. And of course, violation there, they were not supposed to be doing that, but there are occasions when those that would do that. So the mercy seat was placed there, and the cherubims there, and they were made out of pure gold. And then also in preparation for the worship in the tabernacle, God commanded for the children of Israel to make a table. And this table was to be 45 inches long, 18 inches wide, and 27 inches high. The purpose of this table was to hold the showbread. It would be in the tabernacle, and continually there would be showbread placed on the table. Like the Ark of the Covenant, the table was to be made out of solid gold. It would have a crown around the top of the table about the width of this, as we would say, the span of a man's hand. And of course that would be beaten work. In other words, there would be designs in this crown around the top of the table. The table also would have 4 rings, 1 in each corner, and there would be staves that would go through these rings, and this is all overlaid in gold. And this would be so that the Jewish priests could carry the table from place to place, because they did have to disassemble the tabernacle and carry it with them to their new location, then set it back up. They'd have to set it up in order to be able to worship God. And so you had the Ark of the Covenant, which was placed in what was called the most holy place. It would be there, and it would be where the priests would go in, they would go in once a year into the most holy place. The table would be placed in what is called the holy place. Basically 3 areas of the tabernacle. You had the outer court, where the people were allowed to assemble. Then you had the inner court, which was the holy place, and that is where the priests could go and they could offer sacrifice, and they could come and they could bring the showbread of the people and place it on the table. And also in the holy place were the candlesticks. The candlesticks, like the Ark of the Covenant and like the table, the Bible says that they were to have 6 branches. In the candlestick there would be 3 on one side, and there would be 3 on the other side, and of course the one in the middle, so that there would be 7 lamps in the candlestick. And this candlestick was to burn continually. When the tabernacle was set up, they were to light the candlestick, and it would give light, and it would be a reminder, a memorial, if you please, of the light that is to be provided for the children of Israel. And in connection with the candlestick, you had the snuff dishes, that is the thing that was used to put the candles out, to put the lamps out, and also the thongs that were there. And each one of these things was to be overlaid in gold, the candlestick itself. Very interesting here in the making of the candlestick, it said that the design was, as they would make this and craft it, there would be flowers, and there would be like cups that were in the shape of almonds on this candlestick. Now the Bible doesn't say what kind of flowers, but there was flowers. And so there was design. It wasn't just plain sticks, but there was design built in this. And Moses was given instruction as to exactly how this was to appear, and the Bible goes into some detail in pointing out exactly how these designs were to be placed on each candlestick. And it was to be made exactly as God had instructed it for it to be made. The tabernacle itself was to be made of 10 curtains. The curtains were to be 42 feet long and 6 feet wide. Now this was to make the different courts in the tabernacle. And these curtains were to be joined together. They were to be joined together by, as we would say, I guess, connectors today in our language. And these connectors were to connect together in 50 loops on each curtain. Each curtain had to contain a place so that these 50 connectors could be joined together to join the curtains together. The curtains in number totaled 10 for the tabernacle. That is for what we would call the walls of the tabernacle. And there were 5 that were looped together, and there were another 5 that were looped together to form the walls of the tabernacle. And the colors, the curtains were made of linen, and the colors in the curtains were blue, purple, and scarlet, interwoven. You know, you could picture that a very beautiful piece of fabric here. That these curtains were interwoven with blue, purple, and scarlet. Now something else is added to that in the design of these curtains, there were to be the images of cherubims. That just like the 2 that was on the mercy seat. And so it had to be some very skilled labor here that went into this design, to be able to make these curtains out of these different colors, and to be able to put the images of the cherubims on the curtains. Very beautiful scene indeed. And then they would join these together with the connectors. 5 curtains each would be joined together, and these connectors would be of solid gold. They would connect the curtains. And then the top, as we would say, and if you think of the tabernacle as a tent, the top of this tent was to be made of 11 curtains. And they were to be 45 feet long and 6 feet wide, and the top was to be made out of goat's hair. So, and it would be one solid piece, that they would weave this out of goat's hair. And just like the curtains for the walls, the curtains that would cover the top would be joined together. 5 would be joined together, and in this particular case, 6 would be joined together. And these would cover the top of the tabernacle. And they would be joined with brass connectors. As the walls were joined with gold connectors, these were joined with brass connectors. Then on top And just like the sides, they would have beautiful color to them, because on the top of this layer that was on the tent-like structure, they would add a layer of ram skin, and they were to dye it red. So as you could picture in your mind, as you were looking at the tabernacle, you would see a building and its walls that went around, the curtains that went around this tabernacle would be purple and blue and scarlet, and there would be, just to use a modern day language, there would be images of angels all over the walls. And then from a distance, as you were looking at the tabernacle, the roof would be red that covered it. So you had the contrast there in colors of this beautiful blue and purple and scarlet, and then top that off with a red roof that would cover the tabernacle. And the entire structure was supported by boards, as we would say the frame for this tent structure would be supported by boards all the way around, with bars that ran through to connect the boards and hold them together so that the frame would stand on its own. And all of the boards and the rings and the connectors that would hold the bars to the boards, all of these were overlaid with gold. And so the tabernacle, without a doubt, was a beautiful structure that was built. And anyone coming, in the area and seeing the tabernacle would see a very beautiful, as we would say, temporary, portable place of worship, where God would meet with His people to worship. In addition to the boards that were made and covered with gold, and all of the things that went in the tabernacle there that was made with gold, there was a special veil that was made to separate the holy place from the most holy place. And this veil would not allow the priest even to see into the holy place, but it would separate. And so there was a special veil. In addition to that, there was a door, as we would say, a covering that would be placed between the holy place and the outer courts, so that the people could not see into the holy place or the most holy place. And so these coverings were to be made special, and of course they were to be made out of linen, and they were to be scarlet and blue and purple, and they were to be hung with rings of gold that they would hang down, and they could go from one chamber, if you please, to the next chamber in doing the work that was to be done. The arrangement of the furniture, if you please, in the tabernacle, as we say, the holy place, we have the outer court. That's where the people would assemble. And by the way, when Israel was traveling through the wilderness after the tabernacle was built, they would camp around the outer court of the tabernacle. So the tabernacle would be in the center, and there would be tents up all the way around where the children of Israel would live until God gave them instructions to move on. So they would be camped around the outer courts of the tabernacle. And then, of course, there would be the holy place, and then the Holy of Holies, as it's referred to many times in the Scripture. The Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat would be in the most holy place, and it would be hidden by the veil. The table, which held the showbread, was to be outside the veil in the holy place. And it was to be on the north side. Now this is very interesting. In these instructions that God gave Moses, each article of furniture that was placed in the tabernacle had to be put in a certain location. You couldn't just go set it up in there any way you wanted to. The table that had the showbread was to be placed on the north side. And then the candlesticks were to be placed on the south side in the holy place. And they were to be placed there. And they were to, each time that they would move from one location to another, this is the way that they would have to set this up. Now, many of the commentators have reference to Hebrews chapter 9, verses 24 through 26, which talks about the tabernacle and makes a comparison there to the church and to heaven. The holy place being the church and the most holy being heaven. It says, "For Christ is not entered into the holy place made with hands, which are a figure." Now, when God made the tabernacle, He made it to represent both the church and heaven, which are a figure of the true, but into heaven itself. Christ, being a high priest, did not do as Aaron the high priest and go into the most holy place, that is the tabernacle, or later the temple. But He went into the real thing. He went into heaven. So what the Hebrew writer is saying, that when we see the beauty of the tabernacle and how God had divided it up, the outer court being the world, the holy place being the church, and the most holy place being heaven, that it was a preview, if you please, of what was to come. Same way with the temple. That as beautiful as Solomon's temple was, with its outer court, with its holy place, and with its most holy place, as beautiful as it was, and when the Queen of Sheba came to see Solomon and to see his kingdom and to see the temple, she said, "The half have not been told." It does not compare to the real thing. And that's what the Hebrew writer is saying. For Christ is not entered into the holy place made with hands, which are a figure of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor yet that He should offer Himself often, as the high priest entered into the holy place every year with the blood of others, or then must He often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world hath He appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of Himself. And that is, the priest went into the holy place to offer sacrifice unto God on a continual basis. But Jesus, our high priest, offered Himself and went into the most holy place, that is heaven, one time. And that's all He needed to do. So what we read about in the Old Testament in studying about the tabernacle, and then of course later the temple, is a representation of what God wanted us to understand, the church and its relationship with heaven. That just like the tabernacle and the temple had the most holy place, I should say had the outer court and the holy place and then the most holy place, today we have the world, we have the church, and we have heaven. And that's what God wanted us to learn, as by using this as a representation. Someone might ask, well, what happened to the Ark of the Covenant? What happened to the tabernacle and the things that are in them? After the Israelites crossed the Jordan River and entered the Promised Land, the tabernacle was erected in the city of Gilgal, where it remained for the 14 years it took them to conquer the land. That is, they had to go in and they had to conquer the land and they had to divide it up. So The tabernacle stayed in Gilgal for 14 years. And then, after the land was settled, they disassembled the tabernacle. They took it apart. The tapestries and the rugs, that is the top part, the badger skins that was dyed red, and the ram skins, they took it apart, they disassembled it, and they took it to the city of Shiloh. And at Shiloh they built just basically stone walls to represent the outer court, separated the outer court, then the holy place, and the most holy place. And they took the coverings of the tabernacle and used them as the roof. For this, I guess you would say in their minds, to be their permanent tabernacle. And it stood for 369 years. That they used this structure there for 369 years until the Philistines came and they destroyed it. This was during the time of Samuel. The Philistines came and they destroyed it. And afterwards, the tabernacle was basically temporary sanctuaries that were erected in the cities of Nob and Gideon, and the total of years there was 57 years, and then Solomon built his temple. Jewish historians believe that the Jews took the boards and the rings and all the parts that were overlaid in gold, and they hid them so that the Philistines couldn't get them. And no one knows where they are today. As for the Ark of the Covenant, it was placed in Solomon's temple, in the most holy place in Solomon's temple. And there are many stories that will come up through the Bible in reference to the Ark of the Covenant. You may remember that David, it was captured, and David went to bring it back, and put it and to bring it back, and didn't do as God would have him to do. But the Ark of the Covenant will come up on many occasions. But in 587, when Nebuchadnezzar marched his army, the Babylonian Empire army, against the children of Israel, he destroyed Solomon's temple. He completely destroyed it. Whether in that event he captured the Ark of the Covenant, we don't know. But that is the last time in the history that the Ark of the Covenant is ever known as to its location. And from that time on, there is no reference of the Ark of the Covenant. So it is possible that Nebuchadnezzar and his army took all the gold, of course, out of Solomon's temple. And along with the gold that was there, he took the Ark of the Covenant. It's also possible that, like the Jewish historian said about the boards and the bars and the rings and the things that were in the tabernacle, that the Jewish people took them and hid them. But we don't know. The Bible doesn't mention the ark after God allowed the Babylonians to come in 587 BC, 587 years before Christ, and to destroy Solomon's temple. And when I say destroy, they completely destroyed it. There wasn't anything left but just ruins. And so this is the answer to the question, what happened to these things? And how did they come about? Then I want to say this in closing. God's plan in giving the instructions for the tabernacle were never intended for the tabernacle to have to be used as long as it was. But the reason it was used that long was because of the disobedience of the children of Israel. And the reason that the ark was taken so many times by Israel's enemies was because of the disobedience of the children of Israel. That God allowed the other nations to punish them and they lost possession of the ark, and the tabernacle was destroyed because of that. And great detail is given, and I cover this simply to point out that the law of Moses, along with the instructions for the feast days, along with all the commandments that are given, the law of Moses contains a lot of instructions that the children of Israel had to follow. And God said through Moses to the children of Israel, see that you do it according to the plan given in the mount. That is, you don't have a right to change anything that I've instructed you to do. That you do it according to the plan. And that's always been God's way. That man do things as God specifies that man do them. Doesn't mean that man's way may not be good. It just simply means that God's way is the right way. If you're here tonight and need to respond to the invitation, won't you do so while we stand and sing?